Hey everybody, Nick here again from SirLinksalot, and today I want to talk to you about something that a lot of people don't want to talk about, which is my SEO mistakes. And I'm going to be diving into the 10 biggest ones. I'm going to be going deep that I've made in my career, how they kind of happen, what the fallout was, and exactly how I fixed them. I'm also going to sprinkle in some anecdotes related to like Reddit and YouTube. So you understand it's not really just me, but these mistakes are mistakes that a lot of newer people and even pros end up making along their SEO careers. So, I think it's something that is important to talk about, and let's dive right into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about, a big mistake that I made that is often overlooked, is ignoring user intent. So I would call this thing, let's say, the silent killer. So early in my career, I obsessed over keyword tools, and I'd see things like best running shoes with tens of thousands of searches, and I'd think, well, that's the one I want, right? But my site, for the sake of relevance, we'd say, I was selling hiking boots at the time, right? Not running shoes. And so I'd get this traffic, but my bounce rate would be sky high and sales would be dead because of it. So why did this happen? Well, it's easy to chase volume and forget that there's a bunch of different search queries with different purposes, right? So we've got things like buyer intent, learning, comparing, or even just browsing, which a lot of us do on the internet, nonstop. So I see mistakes like this on Reddit all the time where people are target informational keywords with product pages and then wonder why their conversion rate is so bad. It's because these people weren't originally looking to buy this product. They were doing, some info gathering, let's say. So how did I go about fixing it? Well, I started mapping user intent to every keyword that I'd be going after, right? So for best hiking boots, I'd create comparison guides. And for clean hiking boots, or like how to clean hiking boots, I'd write tutorials on that. So this shift is going to double my conversion rate at the end of it. And then it slashed my bounce rate as well. So two positives, two birds with one stone right there. And I think this is often overlooked because we're really after that shiny traffic object, so to speak, in the form of how much traffic are we getting by ranking here. But ultimately, that can be an early pitfall that you'll kind of fall into. The second thing that I want to talk about is chasing traffic, right? Which is tied to what we just talked about, but chasing traffic and not conversions. So let's call this like the vanity metric or the vanity metric trap, something like that. I once had a client who was thrilled to see their organic traffic double after a content blitz, but when we checked their sales, they dropped, right? And so why was this happening? Well, we were attracting the wrong type of audience, people looking for free info and not actually buyers, right? So this created quite the issue when it came to a whole bunch of traffic influx comes, and then you're not really reaping the rewards that you were hoping to. So why did this happen? Traffic is easy to measure and it feels great to get, but if you're not tracking your conversions, then you're really missing the whole point of why you're getting this traffic in the first place. So I've seen countless Reddit threads where people kind of celebrate these traffic spikes, and I see this all over Facebook too, but the revenue hasn't budged. And ultimately that means that you're not really getting the end result that you were after. So how did I go about fixing this? I started tracking conversions in Google Analytics, form fills, purchases, phone calls, which is incredibly arduous, but incredibly worthwhile at the end of it, right? I prioritized keywords with clear buying intent, built content around those, and suddenly every content decision was actually ROI driven, right? Not just traffic driven. And getting this through my head was something that elevated me as an SEO, I would say, once that kind of clicked for me. Third thing I want to talk about is over optimization and keyword stuffing. Old school mistakes. And when I first got started, these things were on the tail end of still working, right? Like over a decade ago. So some people were still utilizing them. A lot of people didn't want to, quote, waste money on, backlinks they were buying using generic and branded kind of keywords, but that was a huge mistake. So back in the day, I'd cram keywords into every header, image, paragraph, you name it, shove. And it worked, like I said, back then until it didn't. And for me, that timeline was honestly pretty short. Google's Panda update, I'm pretty sure, is what wiped out, like half my rankings overnight during that time. And it was because I was operating like a real, more interested in the black hat shortcuts than I was trying to craft something that would yield the end results that now, over a decade into, it's what I'm more going after is longevity, right? Why, did this happen? Well, there's this persistent myth that keywords, or rather more keywords, equals better rankings. But Google's algorithms now use NLP, so natural language processing, to understand context and not just the keywords themselves. So, you don't have to be as specific. You're not really going after an algorithm that's like real rudimentary in what it's looking for, right? It's pretty complex and it can deduce all these values. So how did I go about fixing it? I rewrote my content for humans first, using, natural language, synonyms, things like that. And I also started using tools like Surfer SEO, ClearScope to optimize semantically, and not just for exact matches, but for, everything that I was actually tailoring my website towards. So my rankings ended up rebounding, and my content actually got shared more, right? Which in the end also produces more result on the money standpoint, which is what we're all after here. The fourth thing I'd like to talk about is neglecting technical SEO. And if you've watched old videos with me, I'll tell you, I'm not the most technical SEO. I still am not, but this is something that, if you've got to, then you put forth a little bit extra effort, and it's definitely worthwhile. Let's call, technical SEO the invisible ceiling, something like that. For years, I thought content and backlinks were really all that mattered, and I still think they're predominantly what matters. But at one point in time, I noticed a competitor with weaker content outranking me, started going down the gambit with it, and it turns out that their site was loaded in under a second and a half, 0 crawl errors, things like that, and mine was slow and riddled with broken links, etc., right? And when you clean those things up, turns out they do matter a bit, right? So why do things like this happen? Well, technical SEO isn't invisible, but it's invisible until it's a problem, let's say, right? So issues like slow load times, mobile usability, and crawl errors can quietly kill your rankings. It's not something where it's like automatically like you see this huge change. And even if you fix them, you're not going to typically see a huge change right out of the gate either. This is one of those micro fixes that adds up over time, and it's worthwhile to make sure that you're doing them properly, right? How'd I go about fixing this? Besides arduous hours of me learning something that I'm not too good at, to be honest with you, to get down to it, I ran regular audits with programs like Screaming Frog, Google Search Console, and then I'd compress images, fix broken links, implemented schema markup, all this, what I would say is pretty boring stuff when it gets down to SEO, at least for me anyway, if I'm being honest. But in the end, my site speed improved, and so did my rankings, etc. So, especially on mobile, these kinds of things add up, and they do definitely matter. Number 5, I didn't study the competition enough, right? I'm just kind of flying blind through everything. I used to create kind of content based on what I thought would be helpful, especially like when I first started, and I'm not ashamed to say this. This is just it happens to a lot of SEOs, right? But yeah, I would, put out this content based on whatever I think is helpful. I wouldn't really look at what other people are doing that are already ranking. And this is a big mistake. The top pages had comprehensive guides, tables, and expert quotes, while mine were just walls of text. And let's be real, when Google was the main source of search, all you had to do was go look at what the top few competitors were doing. You would get an idea of what was going on in that SERP. And now with LLMs, it's a very similar kind of contemplation that you're doing, right? So, see what the competition is doing or what's getting mentioned, etc., and then kind of base off, what these things are looking for, what these algorithms are looking for when it comes to positioning a website somewhere. So, why did this happen? It's easy to get stuck in your own bubble. It definitely was. And, depending on where you start learning SEO, there's a lot of bubbles to get stuck in. But, Google's already telling you what it wants to rank. So are LLMs. So just go look at the SERPs or start, discussing things with the LLM, and it's going to explain to you exactly what it's looking for. It's not that complex, but we make it complex, or we ignore things that can definitely help us out just by adding a little bit of extra time and effort. So how did I fix it? Started reverse engineering the top 10 results for every single keyword that I was looking at. What topics do they cover? How do they structure their content? What media do they use? I use this as a blueprint, and then I'd add my own unique angle, which now, as we know, is very important when coming up over the competition in SERPs. So something to be aware of, right? Moving on, number 6, I'd let my content go stale. So, forgotten assets all over the place, let's say, right? I once had a blog post that ranked for number 1 for hiking boot care, and over time, I slipped to page 2. Why? Competitors were publishing fresh content, guides, updated methods, new products, continually backlinking, you name it, right? And I had just kind of taken it for granted that I was already in that position and kind of ignored it as I started going after all the endless other bits of content that we could go after to, attack different keywords. Why did this happen? SEO is never going to be, and a lot of newer people, really they need this jammed down their head, but SEO is never going to be a set and forget job. It doesn't work that way. You don't write content, place links, and then get ranked and stay there forever. Google's going to reward freshness, especially for topics that evolve over time. And some SERPs are way more competitive than others, and you need to be aware of this. It's good to go back, comb through old content, make sure it's up to date, update your website, do things like that, right? So how did I fix it? Now I schedule basically a quarterly content audit. So I'll go in, update stats, maybe some new tips and tricks, refresh things like visuals. And then sometimes just adding a new section or video even brings that post back to life. You'd be surprised. It's like a minimal effort thing that you just have to remember to do, and it can really help you out. Moving on to number 7. The big one is one that I see people try and skirt over all the time: neglecting your internal linking. So orphaned page syndrome would be like a maxed out version of this, but even just not giving any inner links to certain pages is going to affect this. So, back in the day, I'd have dozens of high quality pages. They wouldn't be ranking, and a lot of times they wouldn't even be indexed, right? Why? Well, they had no internal links pointing at them. This isn't an end-all kind of thing, but if you don't have any internal linking, then there's no crawlability going to these pages, say for the sitemap, which doesn't look very natural, You want clients or, people that drop onto your website, users, to be able to comfortably move in and out of these pages and kind of explore your website, right? The crawler is going to digest this and use that information the exact same way. So moving on, why did this happen? Internal links help Google discover and prioritize your content, right? Again, crawlability. So pages that don't have any interlinking to them operate like these islands in the middle of nowhere that aren't getting crawlability to them. And, in and of itself, is that something that seems natural, or that it's a page that somebody really cares about if it's not even connected to the greater whole? To me, it seems sketchy, right? And to Google, if you look at the data, also thinks the exact same thing, right? So how did I go about fixing this? Simple. Map out my site structure and made sure every important page had at least 3 internal links from relevant high authority pages. And that's basically it. I'd also use descriptive anchor text that would help both users and search engines kind of digest what this is going to be about, right? There's also different plugins that you can use, and I like to use them selectively, not as full automation tools, but Link Whisperer is definitely one that deserves a mention right here that can help out with some of this automation. Number 8, not building backlinks to new content. So I'd publish and pray at that point in time, especially when your budgets are pretty low. This happens a whole lot. So I used to think, if the content's good, people are going to end up finding it. Traffic will go through it, and have this kind of white hat mentality about it. But man, even the best articles flop without any promotion. That's simply the way it is. So why does this happen? Backlinks are still one of the top ranking factors. It is what it is. You see people arguing this all the time. For the entirety that I've been in SEO, this is the way it is. And I don't imagine it's going to change at all. And even if you talk to LLMs now about this shift that's going on, they care about backlinks a whole lot too. Authority factors factor in tremendously here, especially since the content kind of gap has been evened out thanks to AI. So yeah, without backlinks, your content is not visible. It's not getting crawled, etc. Right? So how do I fix this? Built outreach into my publishing process. That's why SirLinksalot is the company it is. It all stems from me needing links to my original projects, which included local clients and then some affiliate stuff that I started out with, which is now, guest posts, digital PR, resource page outreach, things like that, right? But it started one piece at a time. I'll tell you this, from building it myself, I wish there was somebody like SirLinksalot that I could have just gone to at that point in time, make my life a whole lot easier. But yeah, so, I share this content as well in relevant communities and forums. That's easy, doesn't take too much effort, and it does actually add a whole lot of value. And the result is that faster indexing happens, higher rankings end up happening. And as you start getting those rankings for these smaller positions or smaller search terms, it boosts up your credibility on the stuff that you're actually going after too, with buyer intent, etc. So worthwhile to pay attention to. Number 9, relying too much on AI content. When this first became a thing, there was that temptation of speed that everybody had. And especially, it happened to me too. I remember watching some really talented SEOs at the forefront of using AI for programmatic SEO, just ripping through search and thinking, wow, I got to get on this, right? And at that point in time, I experimented with AI generated articles. They were fast, cheap, and easy. And, from a personal level, those results felt pretty generic and frankly kind of boring, for lack of a better way to explain it. And in the end, that window where you could rank a whole lot of this stuff was gone pretty quickly. Then they wouldn't rank. Readers didn't engage. It all looked the same. And now that we're in this era of hyper AI spam, everybody sees it. Everybody knows what it is. And it's quite honestly not a good look. And then algorithms don't favor it at all anymore. So, why did this happen? Well, AI is just a tool. It's not a replacement for expertise. And, Google has values on things like EAT, which is experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. Yeah, so, these are things that you've got to look out for and really pay attention to. How did I go about fixing it? Well, I started shifting from using AI to write these articles, etc., more so to just create outlines and drafts. But then every piece that's written is also going to get a human touch. So personal stories, expert quotes, and unique insights that add up and build a narrative that doesn't look like the generic spit out AI kind of, garbage that we see everywhere. So the difference in engagement and rankings is night and day right there. And quite honestly, I think as we see the internet go towards this era of nonstop AI spam, it's going to be more and more important to be more authentic for your branding, no matter what that is, because people soon they're gonna just be trusting the faces that they know that have been executed on topics properly for a long period of time. Because soon, and it's already getting that way, it's hard to know what to trust and what's actually going to help you in the long run when it comes to information. And then last but not least, number 10, outsourcing to low quality SEO agencies. This was a cleanup nightmare, right? And for me, right, I started off with an SEO agency, but let's say the people that I partnered with to execute different jobs when I was working on automation early on, this is something when you're dealing with a low budget that is a pain in the butt, and it does end up costing you if you're not careful. So early on, several times, I'd try and hire cheap. Nothing ridiculous, but just, for certain projects that we're definitely now in hindsight, I'm looking at it and I was trying to make something very simplified that was rather complicated. I would hire the cheaper route, trying again to be more black hat, gray hat in consideration to the rankings I could get. while utilizing less money, less effort, right? And what this did was get me people that were executing spammy tactics, using garbage spun content, low quality networks that, were promoting anything, no quality guidelines, nothing like that. And in the end, even if it worked out for a little bit of time, rankings would end up tanking, and then you'd have to spend months cleaning it up. And quite honestly, now when I see these poor folks that have gone that route this day and age, a lot of times it's not a clean up the mess kind of situation. It's, hey, this thing has been bled dry. You got to start over. And that's the unfortunate truth. That's why I think whenever we preach about what we're doing, SirLinksalot always talks about the longevity of the asset, because that's what we're after. We're not here after quick rankings. We want strategic and effective rankability within a decent amount of time. But, we've got to be careful with how we go after that, because there's several schools of thought, but the one that I like is that you get it up, you get it ranked, and when it's making you money, you can, count on it to keep making you money over a long period of time, versus other people, and they've made businesses out of it, do the churn and burn kind of situation or something similar to that. Longevity is what we preach here. That's what I like to do. And I think it's just less headache for better long-term money flow. So, why does this happen? Well, SEO is full of shortcuts. And thanks to that, it's also full of snake oil. And, if it sounds too good to be true, it most likely is. And I can't tell you the last time that I tried something out. I'll still experiment with different products and things like that here and there. But I can't tell you the last time that I experimented with something that was, cheap, spammy, and extremely effective. Back when I first started SEO, there were things like that, but that was in the time where things like GSA were working, right? Long gone. That's how it is. How did I fix all that? Well, now, especially, with a bigger capital flow, I vet every partner thoroughly. It's not just like running around and then hire somebody within a day. It's really hold interviews, make sure that who I'm hiring for the job understands what I'm looking for and knows how to tailor a campaign to execute on what it is I want. So I'm looking for several things. I'm looking for transparency, looking for somebody that's got, real ability, real world ability. So looking for case studies, things like that. And then I'm focused again on long-term results. I don't want to hear anybody talk to me about how they can do things quickly, etc. I'm looking for somebody who wants to be there long-term and likes running campaigns for a long term. Even if I've got a slow roll at the beginning, that's perfectly fine with me. This is what I prefer now. And then, like always, I'm going to keep a close watch on the on page of my website, and then the backlink profile of my website using, tools like Ahrefs, SEMrush, KPI.me, etc. Right? So yeah, that's, I think those are the 10 main issues that I could bring up that I think would help out with newer SEOs not to make the same mistakes. But, some kind of just final thoughts here. These mistakes all ended up costing me rankings, more importantly, revenue, and man, a whole lot of sleep, especially early on. I've talked about it before. I've done a million different hard things in my life, and getting an SEO business to work, that level of entrepreneurship, was the hardest thing that I've ever gotten to work. I'm not going to lie about it. It cost me a lot of sleep early on. But each one of these mistakes taught me something valuable. And I think that's something that everybody needs to kind of learn how to do, especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur, but especially in the tech sector. There's so many things that can go wrong, make you pull your hair out. Then you've got to calmly go back, be able to audit and digest what happened, and then keep that close to you so you don't make the same mistakes later on. And then if you're serious about SEO, you learn from these blunders. Don't wait for Google to teach you the hard way, because I've been there before too, and it sucks. And there's a lot of people talking about things like this out there. Go out there and keep learning. Learn from me, learn from other people that are honest about their mistakes, right? Entrepreneurship, especially in search, is not a win-win-win up only situation. I've never seen that happen for anybody that's entered this field, right? And it definitely didn't happen for me. And, in the end, that's fine, because the awards that you get when you do make it through, when you find recipes to success, they'll keep you fulfilled in ways that, going to a 9-to-5 probably won't, in my opinion. But yeah, I think that's about it. If you found this deep dive helpful, please, please, please smash that like button, subscribe, and, drop on your own SEO horror stories in the comments. Join us on SEO Roundtable in Facebook, where we discuss all these things actively every single day. And let's make sure that we help each other get better, one mistake at a time. Again, Nick from SirLinksalot. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you found value in this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you can stay up to date with the latest in SEO strategies. For more in-depth resources and premium link building services, visit us over at SirLinksalot.co. And if you're looking to connect with other SEO professionals, join the conversation in our Facebook group over at the SEO Roundtable. Thanks a lot.